It was a case of exploitation of innocence and faith. Those words today from prosecutors in the case of a former Duluth youth pastor who will now spend the next 13 years in prison. 36-year-old Jackson Gatlin was sentenced today in connection to 5 cases of criminal sexual conduct. He used his position of authority to gain access to and sexually assault several girls. Earlier this month, he took a plea deal agreeing to serve at least 13 years in prison. And although we were not allowed to bring cameras into the courtroom, Northern News Now's Isabella Zadra was there for court proceedings today. Isabella, a very emotional day for the victims.
Yeah, Dan, victims and their families filled a Duluth courtroom to hear the sentencing of Jackson Gatlin. He was sentenced to 13 years for 2 of the 5 cases against him. According to court documents, these incidents of sexual misconduct took place from 2007 through 2010. Gatlin was a youth pastor for Vineyard Church at the time, and documents show he met most of his victims through the church. Today, those victims read impact statements addressing Gatlin about his actions and how they change every aspect of their lives. Jean Filkins, one of the victim's mother, said her daughter took her own life after suffering from the pain caused by Gatlin. She also said she has lost faith not only in the church, but in all people who are supposed to be caring for young children. After the victim spoke, the judge addressed Gatlin, saying he's in great debt to all these women because without that plea deal, Gatlin would be spending much more time in prison. The victim's attorney added that victims shouldn't be afraid to speak up because someone out there will believe them.
It helps in not only the healing process, but as we see here, with our criminal justice system, these perpetrators can be prosecuted many years out into the future for their crimes.
He also says anyone who's been sexually assaulted can come forward because it's never too late to seek that justice. Gatlin did not address the courtroom today and showed no reaction to the judge or the victims. He will serve those 2 13-year prison terms concurrently, and he'll also need to register as a sex offender. Gatlin is expected back in the court tomorrow where he'll be sentenced for the remaining 3 cases against him.
Thank you, Isabella. And Isabella is going to be at the hearings tomorrow for that next sentencing. And these are just the criminal charges Gatlin faces. There are 8 civil cases open against him, his parents Brenda and Michael Gatlin, the Vineyard Church's Duluth branch and Vineyard National Church. And his father, Michael Gatlin, was the head pastor at Vineyard Church when that misconduct took place.